Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back to the FilmSpeak channel for another WandaVision review and recap. I'm, of course, your host, Griffin Schiller. And just to preface this whole thing, again, I am working remotely, so that's why you are not getting this stream in the optimal quality that I would like to present it to you all. But we did it last week and we had a great discussion, so hopefully we can have another great discussion this week just with a mobile setup. You know, I think I got to get like a mobile mic or something better than just this guy so I can record stuff on the go. But yes, we're going to be discussing WandaVision episode 5 and all of its spoilery goodness. So if you have not seen the episode, click this click save this to your watch later playlist and all that good stuff, and then come back and join us. But if you have seen the episode, be sure to jump down in the comments section and let us know your thoughts, your theories. Crazy episode here, so much to break down. Very excited to do so. And of course, I don't do these alone. I am joined by Elliott from Movie Files. Elliott, how's it going, buddy?
What's up, man? Hey, I know a good tech guy. He goes by the name of Vision. He's good with computers and technology and stuff like that. I'll give you a hookup, man. He seems to pop up, dead or alive. He's coming through in the clutch.
Well, that's good. At least some. Yeah, I definitely need like Vision to just give me a portable setup here and there. But, anyways, yeah, dude, crazy episode last night. A lot of fan theories that sort of wound up being true, and then a lot of stuff that was just excellent character moments. But overall, I don't know about you, I think this is my favorite episode of the season thus far. And I say this like week to week, but the show just progressively gets better.
And I think that's a sign of a good television show, man. It just like anything, as we talked about comparing to a movie, some of the best films, they get better as they go on from one act to the next. And like you said, character development, the big reveals, the stuff we predicted. This episode was fantastic. And this did exactly what we talked about last week, regarding Westview and spending some time outside of Westview, getting answers in Westview, but also they outside of Westview are still trying to figure out things like we are. Like, how is she bringing back Vision without the Mind Stone? We'll talk about that secret sword headquarters that you broke into, which was apparently as we talked about, the scrap Vision in-game credit scene that they kind of mixed into the show. But Evan Peters, Quicksilver, is he not? Oh, man, it's a lot of stuff to break down, man.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many theories to sort of like go around here, especially like what you just said about Evan Peters. I mean, not spoiler, this is a spoiler review.
Yeah.
Quicksilver's back, guys. Quicksilver is back, and it's the Fox Quicksilver. And my favorite part of that whole thing was just Darcy's comment. And they were just like, she recast Pietro, and I was like, that was great. That's it. That's exactly what I could have hoped for that whole reveal. But listen, I mean, like we knew this was coming. We knew Evan Peters was going to return. We knew that he was most likely going to be playing Quicksilver. Now, whether or not he is actually the Quicksilver that Wanda knows is another question, because as this episode sort of progressed, we started to learn a little bit more about Wanda and her grief and everything. And when her kids, when Sparky died and her kids were talking about, Mom, you have the power to resurrect her, there was like a barrier there. She's like, yeah, I can do that, but that's against the natural order of things, and it's not right. So the fact that Pietro comes back as Quicksilver, and it's Evan Peters, I feel like indicates that it wasn't necessarily her who resurrected him. Whether or not this is Mephisto in disguise, whether or not this is something that Agnes had to do with, because we get a whole lot of, Agnes tricks in this episode, I think remains to be seen. But the one thing I am confident about is that this is not Quicksilver as we know him.
Yeah, you just hit it right on the head, man. Even Wanda was like, she didn't realize who, she really didn't. It's like she was just a shock to the audience. And like you just said, man, I think that, obviously the theories are out there. This is the Quicksilver that we know from the X-Fox universe. And how would he know who Wanda is? And is that really Quicksilver? Is he under the hex just like everyone else in Westview? Is he Mephisto in, Evan Peters' form? I mean, it's just so much to really kind of theorize about that. But nonetheless, man, Evan Peters, I'm a big fan of his. American Horror Story, him as Quicksilver, my favorite version of Quicksilver, which, he has an advantage because he's in more films. But nonetheless, it's something I'm excited to explore, who this Quicksilver is, and if it's the same Quicksilver we knew from the X-Men universe.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing I want to ask you is, do you think that we're going to get the Aaron Taylor Johnson Quicksilver in this, or is he just eliminated and we're just going to be getting the Evan Peters one from now on?
At this point, I mean, with the possibilities are endless with Marvel. I mean, it would be a nice cameo. I don't know if that's considered the Luke Skywalker moment that Elizabeth was talking about earlier this week. But again, just going back to if that's really the Quicksilver that we know, if rumors are to be true about Electro and Spider-Man 3 isn't the Electro from Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it's another Electro from another multiverse. Same with Doc Ock. And apparently, before we got on the live, William Dafoe was on the set of Spider-Man 3. So these are alternate versions of the characters that we've seen. This could be another alternate version of Evan Peters as Quicksilver from another X-Men universe that we're seeing on the screen now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm still under the impression that there's some sort of like nefarious happenings going on right now. That's sort of why he came out. But if it is like an alternate version of that Quicksilver, I don't know, that does interest me. And especially like, yeah, you were saying with all the Spider-Man 3 stuff that's coming out, I feel like this is sort of like a natural way of integrating all of these different versions of the characters that we've seen on screen. But just going back to this episode, I think, you know, even outside of the Quicksilver reveal, which was great. I mean, we all loved it. It was so cool. But like outside of that, it was an excellent episode. Like you said at the top, it balanced the sitcom with the MCU action stuff so well written, so well directed, well paced. And you know, it was a 34-minute episode, but I gotta say, I thought it felt longer. You know, I don't know if you got that same vibe, but for me, I definitely did.
In my notes, I ever since Mandalorian, I've like always clocking these Disney shows. So it clocked in at 41 minutes and 34 minutes were actually footage of the show. And we all know they have the longest like credit scenes. But no, it did feel like, I think just because just like you just mentioned, us going between two different multiple storylines, it made it feel like it was more grander, more of a fuller episode than just which I love the first 3 episodes, but it wasn't just a sitcom. We're now kind of, again, what's Monica? Planting the seeds for when Captain Marvel name was brought up. She wasn't like, oh yeah, I know Carol. She was kind of like, let's not talk about her. You know, there's some rift there between Captain Marvel 2. Did Carol not go to the aid of Marie when she was under cancer? Was she in space and Monica reached out to her? She didn't respond. So there's definitely some tension there. And I'm excited to explore that if it's in this show or like I said, Captain Marvel 2.
Yeah, that was a big moment for sure. I mean, very underplayed, very subtle, but like that was, don't get wrong, when they were bringing up Captain Marvel and her abilities, and she just sort of like looks like Carol Danvers is not in her good graces, and that's a really nice way of planting a seed for the future film. It's very subtle, very underplayed. Obviously, Captain Marvel, I don't think is going to be in this particular series, but it was just one of those moments where I was like, oh wow, that's
MCU
good.
magic, man. It's that's a symbiotic relationship of this story connects to that story. They plant the seeds 2 years before we get a movie. That's what you love about Marvel.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and it's in that whole interaction, I loved how like Darcy or I don't know if it was Darcy or Jimmy basically said this, like, well, Wanda almost beat Thanos. Like Wanda was powerful enough to beat Thanos.
It's the conversations we have. It's the conversations we have. Like, you know, Wanda could have destroyed Thanos. Well, Captain Marvel could have destroyed. This show is so meta and it's so self-aware. At this point of Marvel, 13 years into the game, they can not necessarily poke fun of themselves, but they can address things that we've seen in the past. They can do a Thor Dark World and Endgame and redeem that movie and redeem Darcy and kind of bring back things that might have didn't play well, you know, 5 years ago, and they can readdress it in a TV show, in a movie. And that's the beauty of Kevin Feige and what Marvel's doing.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. But yeah, so just in terms of going back to the beginning here, we get the sitcom stuff, the 80s sitcom going right in there. So good.
Love it.
Really, really well done. And obviously, you know, a nice little moment between Vision and Wanda trying to put the babies down to bed, and it's obviously not happening. And then Agnes sort of shows up, and then she comes in trying to do her thing. Right. And then Vision's like, well, no, I'll take care of it. And then she looks at Wanda, she's like, you want to do that take again?
I love that.
This is that was so like chilling and creepy and Vision's whole arc this entire episode was fascinating because he's basically just becoming more and more aware of the extent to which this like things are happening in here. And in that moment he was just like talking to Wanda. He's like, did you just see what happened? Like what is going on here? And then eventually like Agnes does get to, you know, console the twins and everything like that. And then they like grow up to be like 10 years old or something like that. But I don't know. Agnes has a few moments like that of just like trickery going on in here. And if we are to assume that she is Agatha Harkness from the comics, then this could be her way of sort of manipulating things that are going on, like sort of getting into Wanda's head and like teaching her different, you know, spells and stuff subtly, obviously. So I don't know. What do you sort of make of Agnes in this opening? You know, the entire episode as a whole, and I think it's safe to say she has to be Agatha Harkness, right?
Yeah, I think we can place our bets on that. And you just mentioned too, going back to just the themes of the 80s, the growing pains of the world, the you know, Family Matters, Full House. I love those references. But going back to Agnes, I don't think it's a coincidence that every time we saw Billy and Tommy accelerating their age, Agnes was in those scenes. Now, we talked about it a couple episodes ago regarding episode 2 with Wanda being pregnant, episode 3 having the kids. And, you know, we had mentioned there seems to be like this ticking clock. Like there's like a date that has to be met, that they have to have this progression of the kids being here. Again, giving the kids to Mephisto, giving the kids to Agnes to have these 2 kids at her disposal. But I'm thinking that is what we're seeing is Agnes use her powers and or maybe hex the boys. At first viewing, I thought it was maybe Wiccan. He was doing this because he has almost a similar power set to Wanda. Speed, you know, we always know that speedsters can slow down their age, but maybe they can accelerate their age. But no, I'm thinking that Agnes was in those scenes purposely to make these kids grow up, to offer them to maybe the big bad, if that is Mephisto.
That's sort of the route I'm thinking too, because you bring up a good point, which is like, every time they do accelerate growth, or every time they consider accelerating their growth, it is in the presence of Agnes, you know. And then also I think something that was really interesting is when Sparky died, they were like, oh, you have the power to resurrect the dead. It's like, well, you know, and then before then they were talking about, you know, just accelerating through growth in order to just get rid of grief. And it's really interesting that Wanda was there that's saying, like, you can't run from this. You know, it's part of who you are and everything. She's like, she's basically like preaching this really important character moment that she herself is not living by, you know? So it's almost like she is aware that she's making a very terrible mistake here, but she doesn't want her kids to do the same thing. And so obviously, you know, you start speculating a little bit, and the question becomes, did she make a deal with the devil? Did she make a deal with Mephisto in order to temporarily live out this fantasy? And knowing that, you know, these kids, well, maybe not knowing that her kids would be offered up, but knowing that he would take something from her. I don't know. It's starting to look more and more plausible.
What it's sounding like a little bit, and we talked about, again, when we talked about the introduction of Speed and Wiccan, and if they were to incorporate the comic books to a certain extent, Mephisto's fragments are in those children. And if they grow up with Mephisto in their soul and their essence, and they get older, getting older and older, they can kind of take form of what Mephisto wants them to do. So I'm thinking that's kind of where they're heading. And that's why, again, noticing that they got older when they wanted to be babysitted by Agnes. They got older when they wanted to have a dog. They had to be 10 years old. And again, Agnes was there making those steps happen. The only time it didn't work is where we saw the dog die, and Wanda was able to say, no, just pump the brakes, kids. Do not change, get any older. But I think there's a purpose of them getting older, and maybe the older they get, the more form Mephisto comes to life. Yeah,
and there's an interesting sort of, you know, I do think that Wanda is the villain in this series to an extent. Obviously, I do think there is a you know, an overarching power for sure, but like Wanda is making these choices willingly. Obviously, we see when the outside world tries to like break in, they send in that drone, which is of the technology of that era, which is a really smart thing. Yeah, that was really cool. How it's like we can infiltrate using like time appropriate technology, and I was like, oh, that's a cool way of doing that. But so we saw that happen, and then we saw her, you know, we saw the red eyes flare up, we saw the head cock, and then she came out of the hex and just like confronted Monica Rambeau, Sword, and all of these guys.
Yeah.
And that was such a tense moment because, you know, Elizabeth Olsen has talked about the fact that Wanda in this series is like a mama bear trying to hold on and cling to what she has. And she does not like when things sort of disrupt what she's longing for.
Right.
And so when that happens, and she goes out and then she's like, don't like, leave me alone. I'm going to do my thing. You do your thing. We not only learn that she has thousands of people hostage in this hexagon, but then she turns the guns on Hayward and then she walks back.
What a scene. And also too, note that she had her accent back in that scene, that she was the Wanda that we got from Age of Ultron, and she had her Sokovian accent there when she felt threatened. So I don't know if that is a defense mechanism where she feels threatened and she kind of goes back to her ways of Age of Ultron. But that scene was so great, so intense, so needed at the same time to show you where she's come and how threatening she can be. And what I loved about this episode is it's all about perspective. From, if I'm a sword agent, that looks like a villain to me, as Hayward was kind of preaching in the kind of war room that she's a terrorist. We should keep an eye out her and things of that nature. But it's all about perspective. In Wanda's eyes, as she's talking to Monica, I'm not harming anyone. I just want to keep, no one's being hurt in this world unless, things happen. So it's all about perspective, man. That's the other meta nature of the show, is what side can you look at this as in many different ways. You can see Wanda, this is a villainous type of thing, but at the same time, the love of the show is we see it through her eyes. We see that she's grieving. That's what I love about comics too, not to digress, but that's what I love about comic book characters. They can walk through walls, they can warp reality, but if you had the power to bring back someone you lost, you would probably do the same thing that Wanda's doing. And the same can be said about Vision. Right. Do you want to be brought back from the dead? So I love these kind of grounded in reality type of things that we're dealing with. And I think the show is just doing it beautifully, man.
Well, and I think it's interesting because it's like, I imagine in her head, she's able to rationalize bringing back Vision by the fact that he's synthetic. He's not a real person. And so, like, what does that say about how she views him? That's a really interesting thing there, because Vision's last wish was to not be resurrected. We learned that in this episode. And that was very, like, powerful. Like, it was just one of those things where it's like, he knows that he can be brought back. He is an android, but he viewed himself as a human. And in many ways, he was more human than some of the humans in this, in the MCU thus far. And that was a really, like, powerful moment when she grabs him and then completely, like, changes out his mind. Like, he doesn't know where he is at this point, or like the past life that he had. And so it's like, yes, she's doing all this stuff out of grief and whatnot, but like, to what extent, the effect that it has on everyone else, not only Vision, but it's like when Vision's at work and he talks to the other employee and he wakes him up and he's like, I got a family. He's like, what's going on here? Yeah. Vision is starting to see what's going on, the toll that Wanda is taking on everyone else just to make herself feel better. And I think I go back to this line from is really, it doesn't necessarily tie into here, but there's a line in Quantum of Solace, which is that the dead don't care about vengeance. And I think that is a line that you can sort of tailor to a lot of different things. The dead don't care about, what you do after they're gone, because they're gone. They don't have a say in the matter. It's ultimately about you and how you are able to, cope and whatever. And so I think that's just like, we're seeing that with Wanda, and just the extent to which it's going. And I think that's what's so powerful about this episode. And I mean, Vision tries to confront her and she shuts it down. She literally starts playing the credits. And then we see the aftermath of what happens there, of the argument between the two of them. I mean, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany are giving two of the best performances I've ever seen from them. Two of the best performances outside of the MCU, and especially as these characters. But just like in that final moment where they're yelling at one another, it's just like you can see both sides, but like clearly this is not the right way to be doing things, no matter how much you're hurting.
It speaks to the growth of the MCU. It speaks to the world that they've already built. It speaks to the after effect of Endgame. And I think we're gonna see that after effect through the multiple set of Falcon Winter Soldier, Loki, Miss Marvel, Hawkeye, Ronan's accusing and killing people in cold blood. So I think this just speaks to great storytelling. It speaks to the great acting, like you just mentioned. That scene of them, coming head to head and battling, and Vision really kind of questioning her and her authority, which she also gives a big moment where she says, "Do you think I'm in control of all this? Do you think I can control everyone in town?" Alluding to, again, that there's someone else behind some of this manipulation. But again, man, like you just mentioned, the toll that Wanda's going through, and again, why I love these characters and love what we can do. Yeah, they're dressed in suits and they wear capes, but when you take all that away, they are, they have human ways. They have, like you just mentioned, Vision is a synthetic computer that has emotions, that it can emote emotions. He was this robot, this killer robot that was supposed to take over the world, but he became so much more and it was worthy to hold Thor's hammer. And the same could be said about Wanda, someone that was manipulated on, tested on, experimented on. She could have been an evil of which we'll talk about that commercial, but she could have been something worse, but she decided to become an Avenger. And now she's trying to cope with the things she's lost in her entire life. So some great stuff, man.
I think that's the thing, and obviously that's why they probably gravitated towards one another. But like that's what makes those characters so interesting is that they, through all the difficulty that they have gone through throughout the trauma and everything they've gone through throughout their entire lives. And this is actually the topic of the WandaVision video essay I'm working on. But it's like they've gone through all this stuff, and yet they've still managed to like come out on the other side being a hero in the right. And everything. And so when we get to the point where it's like Wanda has lost Vision, the only thing that she had left, it's like she's almost backed into a corner.
Yeah.
And so it's like you feel that desperation of just some sense of normalcy, of wanting the life that, she ultimately deserves. And I think in this episode specifically, you really get a pretty in-depth look at that. And again, Bettany and Olsen are just firing on all cylinders. They're acting their asses off here in so many different ways. They can be comedic in one scene. They can be really intimate and scared in another. There's just so many layers to these performances, especially Olsen with Wanda, Yeah. It's just, it's incredible. I do want to pose one question to you. Do you think that, because we saw Wanda break into Sword, steal Vision, come back out, doesn't necessarily seem like something the Wanda we know would do, but maybe she's, maybe it is just something that she's, felt that she needed to do. And then we see that same Wanda dressed the same way come out and confront the Sword agents. She also had her Sokovian accent back, which, I think the thing with the accent is, is like as she got more Americanized, she kind of suppressed her accent, but now it's sort of like she doesn't care about that. But anyways, the point I'm getting at is, do we think that was the real Wanda that came out, that stole Vision and did all those things?
It's a great question, man. It's something that I thought about as well. And I think, again, it goes back to perspective. Through the eyes that we saw the video footage of Wanda breaking into this headquarters of Sword, which I am like almost confident that Sword facility is Hydra underground of some sorts, of Hydra's working, or AIM of that matter replacing Hydra. And again, perspective. And I think we're going to see that scene again this season. I think we're going to see it from Wanda's eyes, who learns that Vision was taken in, worked on. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if they were trying to implement Ultron into Vision, just like Ultron was trying to create Vision back in his film. Yeah. So again, when we see the perspective of Wanda, she was saving her husband because he has a will. He doesn't want to be weaponized. So I think when we see that scene from her perspective, it was her being a hero, her saving her husband and taking the body back.
That's a great point, because so much of the show is just about like perspective and like how we're viewing things. And it's like, obviously on the outside, as these Sword agents, we're viewing Wanda as a massive threat. But had we seen that entire altercation from her side, maybe we wouldn't be, viewing it as the threat. So that is an excellent point that I'm so glad you brought up, which is like, Sword is only showing us what they want us to see, because they consider Wanda, they still consider her a weapon of mass destruction, which is, she's dangerous, but obviously there's like a part of her that's like, she's not really hurting anyone. She's maybe not making the best choices, but she's not killing anyone. And I think that was the important part about that altercation, was that she pointed the guns on Hayward, but she did not fire. She just left. So
And Hayward too, man. He's someone I'm keeping an eye out for because again, he's the one that's targeting Wanda. He's the one that has this. He has access now. He can show this secret footage that was taken. Again, I'm on to Hayward, man. I don't think he's going to be a good guy. But again, just going back to the perspective, that's just the meta nature and the genius of this show. Again, the show is called WandaVision, and we're watching Avengers on television. And again, when we watch TV, it's about how media, twists the story, how you can see things when they cut scenes as Wanda's censoring her own television. It's such a genius of how they're writing the show. And again, about the perspective nature of Sword watching Wanda. But again, when you're in the situation where we see what happened to Monica last week, it's just so much meta nature and so much genius writing going on in this show, man. I'm just beyond impressed.
I love that you brought up WandaVision and how it's like her vision. This is how she's seeing things. This is how, like the sort of touching on of media manipulation. That was something that I actually hadn't even thought about, when I was watching the show. But you're so right. So much of the show comes down to perspective, and with the censoring and everything. It's like, this show just continues to just dig deeper and deeper. The writing, Jack Schaefer is unbelievable. She needs to be getting the credit.
Marvel has a superstar on their hands, man. It gets me excited for Black Widow that she wrote, or part of the writing team in the future that she has with Marvel. She is just knocking it out of the park, man.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to touch on specifically, but was there anything else that you kind of?
I definitely the commercial I had in my notes. The Lagos commercial, which is to me, it's the darkest commercial out of all that, just for the simple fact of the red
really dark
coming out and like, hey, it's just wash it away, clean it up, and again, it's so genius. Again, we know that this is talking to her trauma, her past, and we all know what happened in Civil War. She accidentally, in her eyes, was saving Captain America from getting blown up by crossbones. But again, we saw the after effects was created to Sokovia Accords. And again, their perspective is this is a nuclear bomb. You guys need to be controlled because this type of stuff happens. Innocent people lose their lives. So again, it just speaks to all the stuff that's right into what side of the fence. How did you see this play out? But I love that commercial.
Yeah, that was a really dark commercial. I saw some people possibly getting a little, they're like, was that appropriate? It's like, is that, how are we feeling about that? But at the same time, all of these commercials have been like borderline inappropriate because of like the connotations that they carry with them. This one, obviously, though, I think just hit a little bit closer to home because it wasn't like, it's not Hydra. It's not some fantasy Nazi group. It's like a real place that like was devastated by what happened. But the key here was the line that was like, when an accident happens that you didn't mean to cause. So it's just like, even though it was a horrible incident and everything, and like so many people lost their lives, I consider this. Oops, sorry, I think I sort of timed out there. But even though it led to Wanda being considered a weapon of mass destruction, basically, it was something that just sort of happened out of fear and out of safety and caring for her comrades and everything. And so I like how they sort of framed it through like her lens,
I totally agree with you, man. And again, one more little theory that I want to pose to you and also everyone in the chat, man. I have this inkling, this weird feeling that I feel like, again, if it is Hydra still under the works, if it is AIM that's taking place of Hydra, I have this feeling that they're trying to recreate an Infinity Stone. And I say that because, again, we're seeing Wanda's capabilities and her powers, and again, the birth of Tommy and Speed. But again, going back to that Hydra, wherever that Sword underground situation was, and knowing that Hydra was making the programs for the miracles, I have this feeling, man, that they're trying to bring back an Infinity Stone some way, somehow, with the birth of these kids, with their powers, with Wiccan, with Agnes, with Mephisto, and Scarlet Witch. I think they're trying to bring back an Infinity Stone, man.
Well, like, that's another interesting point because it's like, yes, we're thinking about like Mephisto and the villains and like everything that's happening inside the Hex. What's happening outside the Hex? Obviously there's like you said, maybe a Hydra resurgence of some sorts, them trying to like, obviously, finish what they were trying to do with Ultron, recreate an Infinity Stone. Obviously there is still that scene from the trailers in which Wanda comes into contact with the Mind Stone. So I think all of that is definitely plausible. But guys, before we wrap up here, be sure to jump down to the comment section and let us know your thoughts and your theories on today's WandaVision episode number 5. So much to break down, so much to just sort of like consider and think about. But again, this show just keeps getting better and better with each episode. But Elliott, I'm going to toss it to you for your closing thoughts.
This episode, to me, just kind of shows, again, what the MCU looks like in a long format of television, and exploring not only the greater of the MCU and planting the seeds for the future, but at the same time, telling a story, a singular story of how a superhero, a being of unlimited powers, deals with losing their family, their loved ones, their brother, and trying to create or recreate a sense of peace and happiness. And we see the consequences of doing that. Again, we touched on it again of perspective. It just decides on how you see the things playing out. And it's just so beautifully told. And I thought this episode was fantastic. The Evan Peters reveal was fantastic. Can't see who he really is. And again, is someone going to be looking for a Quicksilver that was taken out of their universe? I don't know.
Yeah.
A Professor X, maybe, or maybe his own father by the name of Magneto, who might be another version of Michael Fassbender or another version of Patrick Stewart. Again, man, my head is exploding with the possibilities. But long story short, I'm loving this show, and I can't wait for next week.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I'm not anticipating a bombshell of that nature. I'm thinking maybe some like Doctor Strange or so. Well, okay, maybe you're right. Yeah, I don't know. Shit, you might be right. I don't know. Anything, literally at this point, anything is possible. I see some of the chat like talking about the Quicksilver stuff. We touched on Quicksilver at the very beginning, so if you want to go check out our thoughts and theories on that, go to the beginning of this stream. Ultimately, yeah, this show just keeps getting better and better. If this is any indication to the future of Marvel, sign me up for this. What they are doing on television has far exceeded my expectations. And ultimately, again, I say it every week, this is a top 3 Marvel project. And if this continues, I think Phase 4 and beyond is going to be better than anything we've gotten thus far. The emotional storytelling, the character exploration, everything they're doing here is not only just excellent in terms of the MCU, it's just really good storytelling. Like, it is just really compelling television. And so, yeah, all great stuff. But listen, guys, thank you so much again for tuning into our spoiler discussion here, our review and recap of WandaVision episode number 5. Again, let us know your thoughts on the episode down in the comment section below. And if you're catching this on the replay, be sure to give this a like, share with your friends, and subscribe to the FilmSpeak channel for more WandaVision recaps, movie reviews, television content, all that great stuff. We say the conversation, like we like to say, that the conversation continues after the credits, and of course, we'd love to have you be part of that conversation. If you are watching it live right now, highly recommend going back to the beginning because we do touch on the Quicksilver stuff and all that good stuff. But listen, Elliott, thank you so much for joining me on this. Where can everyone find you?
Hey, man, I can't wait to discuss some more with you next week, my friend. But yeah, guys, you can find me here on YouTube at Movie Files, discussing all the fun stuff that we love talking about in movies and TV shows, as well as on social media at Movie Files, live on Twitter, and at Movie Files on Instagram.
Yeah, definitely be sure to give him a follow, and you can always catch him back here every Friday talking WandaVision. But lastly, guys, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can always give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for this WandaVision episode 5 review, and we'll catch you back here next week. Take care.